Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Daniel and I have another blog post for you. This one is trying to answer the question, a flaming mountain thrown into the sea. Is it Babylon the Great or is it an asteroid? And this was brought up after my previous post where I claimed that it could be Apophis. In this post, I'm going to present a new theory on what I think it is and what I think Apophis might be. So let's get started. There may be more than one simultaneous interpretation of Revelation 8:8. So today I'm going to explore an alternative view. Let's read the verse to get started. And a second angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and a third part of the sea became blood. So in my tribulation timeline video, I pointed out that Apophis, an asteroid bigger than the Empire State Building, is predicted by NASA to come between Earth and our man-made satellites on Passover using the full moon calendar in 2029, exactly 1 year after the abomination of desolation as predicted by Daniel. So using the timeline theory from Matthew 24, verse 29, I suggested this asteroid might just hit and that NASA would never tell us the truth. So let's read Matthew 24, verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, which is the abomination of desolation, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. This could mean, the powers could mean the heights or the tops, and the heavens is the sky or the clouds. So the upper atmosphere will be shaken. Then I quoted Revelation 8:8, the flaming mountain, as, hey, see, the Revelation says the mountain's going to be thrown into the sea. But I'd like to thank All Foretold and other comments for pointing out that this actually might be Babylon the Great, which I was starting to realize after the theme of big rocks being thrown into the sea, symbolizing the fall of Babylon the Great, which will never rise again. So I figured I needed to investigate that further. Now, in a prior video, I showed the parable of the cursed fig tree was likely a prophecy about the fall of Babylon the Great in a single day after the rapture of all the figs. One of the ways that I made that connection was Yeshua's response to the astonishment of the disciples to the rapidly withered tree. Note that Babylon the Great falls in a single day, a single hour. And Yeshua said to them, "Truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only be able to do what was done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, it will happen." And Mark says the same thing. So I immediately set out to prove, is a mountain a nation? Could it be Babylon? And I went to, and I found, first I want to show the Jeremiah verse, right? We've got, when you finish reading the scroll, you shall bind up a stone to this book and cast it into the Euphrates, and you shall say, thus shall Babylon sink, and it shall not rise from the evil thing that I will bring. And Revelation. And an angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down and shall not be found any more. So, could it be that a mountain or a stone, a great millstone, they're all referencing the same thing? Do mountains represent kingdoms? This is the evidence I found from my prior post. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of Jehovah's house shall be established on top of the mountains or the nations, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all the nations shall flow into it. That seems to define a mountain as a nation. But then, when I was preparing this video, Jehovah led me to the prophecy of Daniel. And this one makes it very, very clear, and also gives us a clue as to what Apophis could be. So when Daniel was interpreting the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, he said, "Your Majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue is made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and feet of partly iron and partly baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands, and it struck the statue on its feet, and the iron and the clay, and it smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, and the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like the chaff on the threshing room floor in the summer." That sounds like rapture harvest talk to me. The next verse sounds like the rapture. "And then the wind, or the Spirit, swept them, the saints, away without leaving a trace." They vanished. "But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain, a nation, and filled the whole earth." No physical mountain is going to fill the entire earth, right? Earth being a globe, despite some people's opinions to the contrary. And then Daniel gave the interpretation. "In the time of those kings, the 10 toes of the statue," that's what I think, "the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed." That's the mountain. "Nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all of those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it itself will endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron, bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces." It's saying this rock was cut out of a mountain. Maybe it's cut out of the kingdom of heaven. Nevertheless, we have a rock coming, smashing, and destroying the final antichrist kingdom. So this vision clearly proves that mountains can symbolically represent kingdoms in the Bible. So a flaming mountain thrown into the sea could very well be Babylon the Great. But is Revelation 8 describing the fall of Babylon? Because Babylon falls in a single hour. I believe its destruction is by nuclear war. It'll be the end of the world as we know it, and the raptured saints will feel fine. It's hard to imagine people eating, drinking, marrying after a global nuclear war. Therefore, I place the fall of Babylon at the start of the tribulation along with the rapture. There's other reasons it goes at that particular time, including the 70th Jubilee and being 3.5 years before the abomination of desolation. But let's continue. So I'm going to go through Revelation 8 and look at the full context of the verse that throws the mountain into the sea and see if we can figure out more about the timing that this verse is occurring in. "When he opened the 7th seal, there was a silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw 7 angels who stand before Elohim, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers for all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before Elohim in the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it down to earth. And there were noises and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake." So this 7th seal is going to have a lot in common with the 6th seal. Here is, in the 6th seal, let's recall, which was opened just before the 7th, but let's look at the 6th seal. There was an earthquake, the sky rolled up like a scroll, great men hid in caves, or their fallout shelter. Likewise, the first 4 seals are the 4 horses. They were granted authority or power to do things, but they weren't able to exercise the authority because first they had to seal the saints, the 144,000, and everyone had to be raptured before they could hurt any trees or grass. or the earth or the people, right? So the sixth seal is where all the action took place. And now the seventh seal opens, and it's comprised of 7 trumpets, which are, I think, breaking down what was going on in the sixth seal. So let's look at the 7 trumpets. The first 4 trumpets are describing one thing, and the last 3 are the 3 woes. So the first trumpet, there flowed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees also represent nations, trees were burned up, and all the green grass, which I think represents the wicked, was burned up. Likewise, then the next trumpet, trumpet number 2, there was something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. This is Revelation 8:8. And a third of the sea became blood, which could be a third of the people become blood, if we understand the sea is often an analogy for the people. And a third of the living creatures in the sea died. That could be a third of all people dying. And a third of the ships were destroyed. The use of ships here means that maybe the sea isn't referring to people. But if this great mountain is the fall of Babylon, then the sea referring to people makes a lot of sense. And then the ships, I can't quite figure out that. It could just be the military of Babylon, or it could be governments that sit on top of the sea. I haven't quite figured out the mixed metaphor that could represent. Then the third trumpet comes along, and we have another star falling from heaven like a blazing torch. I think this one is the fallout. And it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs. The name of the star is wormwood, which is a type of poison. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. And finally, the fourth trumpet, a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night. This lines up with the sun being black as sackcloth, and the 1,260 days of darkness or gloominess that where the sun's covered with sackcloth. In my video on the 2 witnesses, I point out that the witness is wearing sackcloth, and the sun being compared to sackcloth implies that it's the days that were dark, and not the days were in the sackcloth, not the witnesses. So all that fits perfectly with that description and that timing for this to be the fall of Babylon by nuclear war. Here are some verses just to confirm my understanding of the grass. When the wicked spring as the grass, and when all the workers of iniquity do flourish, it is that they shall be destroyed forever. The voice said, "Cry." And he said, "What shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all the goodliness thereof is as the flower of the field." Isaiah 40, verse 6. All right, so we've got a pretty good description of the fall of Babylon there in the first 4 trumpets to align with the first 4 seals. But then we have the 3 woes. The first woe is the locust, which takes 5 months. The second woe is the 200 million man army, which goes all the way until the midpoint of the tribulation, because that's where we learned that the second woe ends, and then the third woe is coming. And the third woe, or the 7th trumpet, is when God's temple in heaven was opened, and the Ark of the Covenant was seen within his temple, and there were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and heavy hail. So what I notice is that the first 4 trumpets have to occur well before the last 3 woes, which means that the flaming mountain cannot be Apophis, which occurs after the seventh trumpet sounds. So I think that confirms that the first four trumpets are in fact retelling or describing with additional detail the fall of Babylon. A ton of scripture, several chapters in Jeremiah, chapters in Ezekiel and Isaiah, all talking about the fall of Babylon. It is a massive focus of prophecy in the Bible. All right, so let's review the timeline now. I've added the first four trumpets occurring at the beginning with the fall of Babylon. I've got the first seven seals located here as well, because this is the four riders. And the sixth seal is when the sky rolls up as a cloud. And the seventh seal is what unlocks the four trumpets. Then I've got the three woes, which are the last three trumpets, located here. And the dragon is thrown down right after the 80th year of Israel, and they flee into the wilderness for 3.5 years. So this leaves a question, well, what is this Apophis arriving precisely on Passover of all dates? Is there any significance or meaning to that? And I think there might be. Now we have reasonable evidence that the flaming mountain is Babylon the Great. So what does Matthew 24 verse 29 mean? The sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. This happens immediately after the tribulation of those days, which covers everything up to the abomination of desolation. I think the prophecy given from Daniel might just be the clue. A stone was cut out, but not by human hands. That could be an asteroid. It struck the statue on the feet of iron and clay and smashed them. That could be the antichrist kingdom. Now we know Babylon the Great falls and the antichrist rises immediately after that, because the saints have to be raptured and then the antichrist is revealed. Those two things are tied together. So if Apophis doesn't hit, then it's still a perfect symbol or sign in the sun, moon, and stars for a period of time when the serpent is let loose. However, the language about the sun, moon, and stars being darkened gives me the belief that something is actually going to happen on Earth that's going to cause a lot of smoke and a lot of ash to be thrown into the atmosphere and to keep the world dark and gloomy until the end of the tribulation. And also the dragon is said to be thrown down immediately and chase the woman who's going to be in the wilderness for 3.5 years. So having a whole year between abomination of desolation and Apophis being thrown down doesn't make sense to me. Now, if you're familiar with the end of Revelation, it says that New Jerusalem is going to come down, and it was not built with human hands, and it is the final kingdom. But it doesn't come down until the end of the 1,000-year millennial reign, as far as I currently understand. So I don't see it as being directly responsible in 2029 for crushing the Antichrist kingdom. So my timeline from my previous video stands, but the evidence from Revelation 8:8 must be redirected to point to the fall of Babylon the Great at the beginning, and the new evidence from Daniel supports a stone not cut by man being thrown down and crushing the final kingdom, the Antichrist kingdom. Nevertheless, it appears that the darkness of the sky will be renewed at the second half of the tribulation, if we assume Matthew 24:29 is in fact talking about the time after the first 3.5 years. Thank you for subscribing, and I will see you with my next video.